Good morning, good morning, good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Hope you're all fit and well. Hope you're dry. It's chucked it down all night last night, and it's still chucking it down this morning. So, yeah, nice and moist here. I hate that word. Nice and moist here in Epsom, in Leafy, Surrey. How are you doing, everyone? I hope you're all fit and well. Loads and loads of stuff to get through today, but I do need to stop very quickly. I sincerely hope he can hear me. I sincerely hope that he can understand me, because the guy I'm about to address is French. Yves Canessa, former president of the European Demolition Association, is in the chat. Yves Canessa, I haven't seen you 15 years probably, but Yves, it's lovely to have you. But bonjour. Ça va bien, and all that. That's all the French I've got. But Yves Canessa in our midst, would you believe it? Mark Whiting has just arrived via the usual route of Facebook. Chris Ford is here as well. Morning, you sultans of the swinging arm. Oh, I like that. We are the sultans of swing. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, loads and loads of stuff to get through today. We're going to be talking about retaining machines beyond what we currently consider to be our their usual sell-by date today. That's our morning monologue. So if you've got any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear from you. I've been looking at it, kind of taking a bit of a step back and thinking about not just the notion of hanging on to machines, but the mindset shift that will be required to allow that to happen. Because as it stands at the moment, a new machine is kind of a signifier of prosperity, success. It's a suggestion that machines won't break down and therefore projects won't be delayed. Can we break that mindset? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Ken Hatcher has just arrived. Ken, it looks like your weather down in Welsh Wales is pretty much the same as it is up here in Surrey. Rain, interrupted occasionally by rain. Anyway, loads and loads of stuff to bring you today. So, shall we crack on? I think we probably should. Let me roll the intro and get this show on the road. It is a Thursday, the 5th of February. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of Live Streaming, the authentic voice of the global demolition industry. In today's show, Volvo's biggest high reach offers a new perspective on demolition. Caterpillar is going to grab your attention, and we're going to be crushing it with the fine folks at Rubblemaster. Plus, our countdown to ConExpo series continues. Well, with our voyage to Vegas. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. Plus, in today's morning monologue, I've already indicated where we're headed with that. But it is called Let's Hang On to What We've Got. Those of a certain vintage will probably remember that is actually the name of a Four Seasons song. I do apologize. Yeah, Four Seasons, complete with Frankie Valli doing the high bits. Let's hang on to what we've got. Don't let it go. Go, girl. We've got a lot. The first bit works, not so much the second bit. Good morning to All Terrain Manx over on Instagram as well, and loads of other people as well. We've got some news. Oh, hang on a minute. What's going on over in the chat? Cat rebuild to do the dozers till 100. 100? Is that 100,000 hours? Let me see. 1, 2, 3. It is 100,000 hours. Wow. Gary says, absolutely beautiful up here today. Sun is sunny, gorgeous. As we all know, as we've mentioned on the show in the past, the sun shines on the righteous, and there are few people more righteous than Mr. Muirhead. We'll get into all of that in just a moment, but we have a bit of news. If you've actually been on our WhatsApp group today, you will probably be aware of this. Nigel Williams actually flagged this up, but I'm going to share it with you just the same, because it kind of follows on from things we've been saying over the past few days here on the show. So let me do this first. Yeah, this one comes from the BBC, Auntie Beeb. Just this morning, a bypass up in the northeast of England could be axed after costs triple to £36 million. The proposed A68 scheme near Toft Hill and High Etherley was first mooted after residents called for a bypass to reduce traffic and prevent large vehicles and HGVs travelling through the villages. Seems perfectly reasonable. Costs for the scheme, which was approved in 2021, were estimated at under £12 million. But Durham County Council said escalating construction costs had led to it tripling, which no longer offers value for money. Apparently, the impact of inflation on construction costs and other financial pressures meant that the total cost of the project was estimated at up to £36.4 million. So, estimates, very, very quickly, I'll do a quick recap. Estimates 4 years ago were 12 million quid or under 12 million quid. Here we are 4 years later, and that estimate now stands at £36.4 million. Listen, we have had a lot of inflation going on. There's been inflation everywhere. I realise that the materials costs have gone up, but tripling in 4 years. Anybody else think that somebody somewhere is taking the piss a bit? Anybody think that, or is that just me? What we got over in the chat? Yeah, Ken actually says £36 million for a road. It's nothing new. Yeah, it really is nothing. But I realise it's impossible. I realise it's impossible to compare apples with oranges. But imagine, right? Imagine you're sat at home and your wife's been nagging you about the lack of space in your house. So after much consideration and machinations, you decide, I want to sit down with a piece of paper, draw up plans for a small extension on the house. And you call in an architect and he does the final bits, and you put it out to a tender, and a bunch of tenders come back, and they're all roughly £10,000. Well, £10,000 at the moment is not readily to hand, but you think, well, 10,000 quid, I'll save up for it a bit, because that's something I need to do, and the wife is obviously very keen that we do it. And it takes you a couple of years to put the money in place, and you go back a couple of years later and you say, okay, good to go. Can I just confirm the cost? Yes, £30,000, please. As my dad would say, you're having a giraffe. Seriously? Gary says, it's not just machines we throw away these days. We've turned into a throwaway society. We have indeed. And I'm part of it. I've kind of got a foot in both camps. Think about it from a clothing perspective. I still own and wear the Chelsea boots that I got married in 1990, so 36 years ago. They're still going strong. I paid good money for them. They've been resold and rehealed a couple of times, so I've still got those. I've got pairs of shoes that have been resold, rehealed, refurbed 2-3 times, and I'm a big fan of it. I am also quite the one for what the Americans would call a thrift store. I do occasionally go and have a poke around a charity shop, basically looking for designer stuff that nobody else has spotted. I've got a lovely Paul Smith jacket, which would have cost me about 500 quid, and I picked it up for 20, and it's very, very nice. So I've got a foot in that camp. But then, like, I've got a trip to Las Vegas coming up, and it's going to be somewhere, the temperature will be somewhere in the 20s. Now, I've got a wardrobe upstairs, absolutely crammed with T-shirts. Am I going to get those all out and iron them before I go? No, I should probably go to Primark, pick up a pack of half a dozen T-shirts. I'll wear one a day, basically treat them as disposable. I'm every bit as guilty as everybody else. Did you see the one about the road to nowhere? I don't think I did. If they just started the contract in 2021, the vehicles would be running on it now and not just wrapped up in red tape and years of planning approval. Yep. It's all true. I mean, it's very, very easy to look back and say, what is it? The expression "hindsight is always 20/20." Oh, if we'd have done that 4 years ago, as you say, the road would be open and we'd have already spent the money and we wouldn't be facing a tripling of the bill. But that's not how life works, is it? Funny how we could build motorways at such a fast pace in the 60s and 70s with machines that are less developed than today, but now everything takes so long and costs so much. This is a conversation we've had in the past, primarily about the Empire State Building, if you remember rightly. The Empire State Building was built whenever it was, the 20s, I think, probably thereabouts, in New York, up in about 18 months. Today, according to estimates, it would now take somewhere between 4 and 5 years. With all of our capabilities, all of our technology, all of that knowledge that we've gained over the years, and we've actually largely quadrupled the amount of time it takes to build something like that. Is that right? Dan says, very true, Gary. It's unbelievable, unbelievable the amount you throw away. Did you see the quarry load of clothes in a quarry in Africa? I did not see that. Prices are inflated as it means more profits for the big firms at the top of the pyramid. It's wheels within wheels, yeah. You can't help but think that there is a danger of pricing ourselves out of the market. I'm kind of looking in. I'm not sure which way west is from where I'm sat here, but I'm looking at Ken Hatcher here. Go back 18 months or thereabouts, and there was a complete shutdown of all road spending in Wales, a moratorium, as they call it. Basically, we're not spending any money on roads. No new roads at all. Imagine the impact of that on the local economy, the local plant hire companies, the local road builders, the local road pavers, and all of that kind of thing. Now imagine that written across the whole of the country. If the government or the various local authorities went, "You lot in construction are just taking the piss now. Enough. Unless you can start to be sensible." I mean, we had it with railways. There's some very good stats online about the cost of railways here in the UK. I mean, Crossrail in London, and admittedly, it did go under and through London, one of the busiest cities in the world. But the cost of building Crossrail was, I think it was the highest anyone's ever spent on a railway line. And, you know, the Spanish and the French and the Germans and, you know, around the world, people are doing it for a fraction, literally a third, a quarter of the cost. Apparently, they sent 40 containers of clothes a day. Dan says, look at the WhatsApp. It's in there. I'll have a look at that. A road in Lincolnshire. That's the road to nowhere, is it? I'll check that out. Hang on a minute. Not seeing anything yet, Dan, but I'm sure it will pop up. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with anything else. So we've covered that. Let's start the show proper, shall we? Let's have a bit of this before I show you. Well, Volvo's biggest high-reach excavator, and we're looking at it from a slightly different perspective after this. Gary says, is it just a generational thing? I'm sure in our grandparents' days, we would have seen a lot to them in the day. Yeah, I'm sure it would. I personally, I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it's a national thing. As I say, if you go online, you know, use your Google Gemini, your Chat GPT, and compare construction costs for things like per mile or per kilometer of highway, per kilometer of railway, we are the most expensive in the world. Now, bearing in mind, you know, you've got countries like, for example, you've got countries like the Netherlands who actually have no natural resources of their own. below sea level. They've got no quarries to speak of. So all of their materials are imported. They've got huge restrictions on all things related to sustainability and the environment, and yet they can still build stuff for less than we can. How does that make any sense? How is that sustainable? And I mean sustainable financially, not sustainable from an environmental perspective. How is that sustainable? Jim says, I say on an almost daily basis, everything is geared to making businesses money. The smaller firms get frozen out when you're squeezed on price. Yeah, because there is more to it than that, isn't there? When you think about it, we're talking about headline rates there. I don't know who had originally done the estimate on that. What was supposed to be a £12 million project, but the chances are it's going to be one of the majors, a tier one contractor, and that tier one contractor may well be looking to charge £36.4 million for it. They have tripled the cost of that project. Do you reckon they've tripled the amount that they're willing to pay their subcontractors? Personally, I don't believe they have, but then I am a professional cynic. Dan says he posted it last night. I'll go and check. The playing field is vertical, not just unlevel. Yeah, it does feel an awful lot like that. Hold that thought. We'll come back to all of that in just a moment, because I do want to show you this this new Volvo, the high reach version of their EC950, from a slightly weird angle, but I've got to say I do like it. I like it so much I pressed the wrong button. Try this one instead. Yeah, I mean, the chances are that somebody like a Keurig or maybe an Arini will take the EC950 higher than that. But I have to say that is a pretty smart looking machine. If I were in the market, let me be clear, I'm not. But if I were in the market for a new demolition machine, that would want to be one of my starting points. That or the 980 from the fine folks over at Liebherr. Ken Hatcher, yeah, rightly says, put that screen in the cab, be good for the driver. A lot of these high reaches obviously do have a camera array up near the attachment. I do think that is a very, very useful thing. I also wonder about, are we at the point now, and I'm asking a question now, are we at a point now where we can actually move the cameras, or are they fixed in place? You can get webcams now. I'm not using one. I'm using a pucker camera, but you can get webcams now that follow. If I were doing that, it would keep me in the center. I wonder if there's a possibility for maybe a thumb trigger on top of your joystick. I want to have a look slightly to my right, slightly to my left. Do a bit of that so you can have a good look around, get a closer idea of exactly what it is you're about to bite at 100 foot up in the air. If that exists, I apologise. If it doesn't, somebody come up with that. I'd like to see that. Dan, going back to our £36 million triple of the cost bypass, all profits to the management companies, the working man and the subcontractors never get to see it. True dat. Jim says they swallow all the money up, no risk management costs for doing basically fuck all. It's the government redistribution of wealth. Yeah, and haven't we as an industry bought into it? Haven't we bought into it? When you think about, I mean, Balfour Beatty is the biggest construction company in the country, one of the biggest in the entire world. You know, I'm doing this completely off the top of my head. I'm fairly sure that their turnover last year was about 10 billion, and their nearest rival was about 4 billion. So they're far and away the biggest. How much do Balfour Beatty actually build? Is there anyone in Balfour Beatty actually getting their hands dirty? How many people in Balfour Beatty actually own a pair of sight boots or a hard hat? Just asking for a friend. What height is that? I know with the big tool it was 52 feet. So what is that? 10, 15 meters? Maybe a bit more, maybe 18, 19 meters or thereabouts. Dan says, yeah, majority of cameras are fixed. Just can't help thinking, I would put it on a swivel or something like that and just be able to have a bit of a look around. Andy Thornton is here as well. Morning, Andy. You missed him again. And I have to say, the dancing girls this morning were particularly fine. Jim says it's nothing new, but recently it's more blatant and the figures are eye-watering. Yeah, it is. And bearing in mind the current parlor state of the UK economy, are we not kind of pushing ourselves into a corner where one day the government will wake up, or the local authorities will just say, can't afford it anymore. Just can't afford it anymore. I wonder. Anywho, people, it looks like I've frozen over on Instagram. So if you were watching on Instagram and I'm now just a fixed face, I can only apologise. I've no idea what's going on over there. But let me press this because I've got more to show you.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yes, the dancing girls looked a lot like that, only there were more of them and they were wearing less clothes. Your loss, Mr. Thornton. Caterpillar attachments. Let's talk Caterpillar attachments. More specifically, let's talk grabs and grapples. Orange peel grabs. Not to pick up orange peel, obviously. Looks like this.
I'm Christian. I work for AG Metal. At AG Metal, we receive different kind merchandise. With the new grapple, we can unload and load a lot of things more than the old one. It's very easy to maintain, and we didn't have problems with it. We can load more merchandise, and they're very strong. So the cylinder, it's okay every time. We didn't have problem with the cylinders. We don't normally have a kind of a narrative flow to this part of the show, but it all works today for some reason. I don't know. It's purely by accident. We had Cat Hammers in our advert. We then had Volvo High Reach doing the demolition. We've just had that handling the arisings from demolition. Next up, we've got something that's going to crush the arisings from demolition.
I don't know. I've completely fluked that, but we'll be back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
It's just us watching now. Instagram has just gone completely berserk. I don't know what's going on over there, but anyway, that's by the by. We have more to show you. As I've said, we've shown you braking, we've shown you high reach, we've shown you grabs. Now a bit of crushing from the fine folks at Rubblemaster. So Dan has just said, now that's a tune. I have a particular thing for certain types of music. Did anyone recognize that? That sounded an awful lot like Cochise. Cochise by Audio Slave. Chris Cornell was a singer. Most of Rage Against the Machine did a song called Cochise. Sounds a lot like that. Dan saying, like the look of that. Yeah, funny enough, I actually saw I was there. I was the only journalist, I think, as far as I remember. Saw the first Rubblemaster come into the UK about 1,000 years ago. Really did. Again, we're really lucky with today's content because, well, I'll tell you what. Let me play this, and then I'll tell you more after this. So after all of this is over and done with, and we go into our morning monologue, I'm going to be talking about making machines last for longer. Now, maybe it's just fluke, or maybe it is reflective of the nature of the business today, because at the next ConExpo in about 4 weeks' time, they're going to have the ConExpo workshop, where they're going to gather together some of the repair and maintenance and longevity experts from within the major manufacturers to host a workshop on workshops, if you get my drift. It's going to look like this.
Downtime costs money. Smart maintenance turns it into an advantage. Shop Talks and Walks is a hands-on maintenance workshop built to help reduce downtime, led by the people who built the machines you rely on. This exclusive ConExpo workshop brings together maintenance experts from 8 industry-leading manufacturers in one place. Start the morning with coffee and breakfast while industry leaders break down how real-time data, fleet technology, and smarter systems help teams move from reactive repairs to planned, proactive maintenance. Then take it to the show floor for 3 hands-on sessions focused on digital tools, parts and service strategies, and overall fleet health, applied directly to real equipment. You'll walk away with proven ways to cut downtime, lower operating costs, improve safety, and get direct answers from the experts. If uptime matters to you, this workshop is built for maintenance pros, technicians, owner-operators, fleet managers, and anyone responsible for keeping machines moving. Add Shop Talks and Walks to your ConExpo ConAg registration and learn how maintenance can work for your operation, not against it.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I did mention when we were at Balmer last year? I think it was, yeah, when we were at Balmer last year. There were a bunch of companies that actually had rebuilt or remanufactured machines on their stand, which I think was a kind of an indicator of where we're headed. But I do think that is a really interesting take. Dan saying see Hitachi Landcross didn't get involved. There's a lot of manufacturers didn't get involved. Yeah, $199. Yeah, it's ConExpo ain't cheap. It ain't cheap, but it is a bit of a once in a lifetime, particularly if you're from this part of the world. Shit, that's expensive. You're not wrong. Hey, that's what I'm doing. Only not with machinery, but with people. What, remanufacturing them? Could you fix me? Fuck me, there's a lot going wrong here. Dow structural. Hang on a minute. Let me go back to this because I can promise you, Jim, your words about modularity within construction equipment ring in my ears constantly. It's in the morning monologue, but we'll get to it in a moment. Modular design is a key to machine longevity. He says, doweled structural components with weld points that are easily grindable for component replacement. There's another point, which I do mention in the morning monologue. I don't want to give the game away too much, but we've gone through, I think both in the automotive sector, but also here in the demolition and construction equipment sector, this notion that sealed components are the way forward. My own personal take, being the professional cynic that I am, is that sealed components are merely forcing us to have to go back to the dealer and say, we need to fix this. I can't get in it because you've locked it up under lock and key. Can you fix it for me? Going forward, will that still fly? Will that still fly? We shall see. Dan says, Andy, I need a few repairs. I need a complete overhaul. Oh, this one of these days you're going to turn on and you'll just see bits falling off. I promise you will. Anyway, we've already flagged up the morning monologue. It's time to get to it. So that's just about it for the main part of today's show. I'm going to be rolling the intro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I hope to see you all again very, very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, stick around because I shall return after this. For as long that's better. For as long as any of us have been drawing breath in this industry, the arrival of a brand new machine on site has been the ultimate flex. When a contractor rolls out a fleet of gleaming, low-hour excavators onto a project, they aren't just bringing tools, they're bringing an image of reliability, prosperity, and technological dominance. It tells the client that the firm is prosperous, successful, and far too professional to be caught out by downtime caused by aging hardware. We've built an entire culture around that new cab smell and pristine counterweights that are free from scars. But we're reaching a point now where that shiny new metal is starting to look like a massive collective delusion. There's a slow dawning rate. Had a funny feeling this was going to happen. There is a slow dawning realization creeping through the automotive sector that might just hold up a mirror to our own backyard. We've been told for years that the path to a green future is paved with new purchases, that if we just keep swapping our current cars for slightly more efficient ones, we'll save the world. It's a comfortable lie, one that encourages us to keep consuming, as long as the badge on the back says hybrid or electric or hydrogen. But the reality is far less convenient. The environmental impact of digging up the ore, smelting the steel, and shipping a vehicle across the globe creates a carbon debt that takes years of efficient operation just to pay back. We're effectively carbon laundering, trading tailpipe emissions for manufacturing emissions and patting ourselves on the back for what we consider to be an upgrade. If the automotive world is beginning to accept that we might just have to stick with what we've already got, then the construction and demolition sectors are next in line for that same wake-up call. We have to confront the idea that the most sustainable machine possibly isn't the one that's yet to be built. It's probably the one currently sitting in your yard, perhaps with a bit of paint missing and a few thousand hours on the clock. That's not making do, it's about a total revolution in how we value equipment. It means moving away from a world where we scrap a machine because the lease is up or because a newer model has a slightly fancier touchscreen in the cab. But to make this work, we're going to have to dismantle the entire financial and mechanical architecture of this industry. And it starts with the way that we build the kit in the first place. For years, the trend has been toward complexity and sealed for life components that make repair a headache and replacement the only default option. If we're going to expect a demolition rig to pull a 20-year shift, we're going to need to go back to the drawing board. We need machines built for the long haul, heavy-duty chassis that can outlive their power plants, designed with modularity in mind. Imagine a world where, instead of binning a machine because diesel has gone out of favour, you simply pull out the engine block and slide in a hydrogen fuel cell or a battery pack. The bones of the machine stay the same, but the heart is updated. Now that leads us into the murky waters of finance. The 3-year operating lease is the enemy of sustainability. It's designed to keep the production lines humming and the secondary market flooded with young, used equipment. It's a treadmill that encourages us to treat machines like disposable vapes. We need to move toward an evergreen model. Instead of a 3-year cycle, we should be looking at 10 or 15-year partnerships. The finance deal shouldn't just be about the capital cost. It should be a service agreement that includes a mandatory midlife remanufacture. Because remanufacturing is actually where the real magic happens. It's not a quick spray job and a new set of filters. It's a factory-grade rebirth. You take a machine that's worked for 5, 6, 7 years, strip it back to bare metal, ultrasonically test the welds and replace every wearing part until it rolls out with the latest specification and a fresh warranty. In that future, the manufacturers stop being salespeople and start being stewards of the metal they put into the world. Their pride shifts from how many units they've shifted this quarter to how many of their machines are still in peak condition after 2 decades of hard labour. But the biggest hurdle isn't engineering or finance. It exists in the space between our ears. We've spent decades telling ourselves and our clients and our bank managers that a new machine is a sign of a healthy business. We use it as a marketing tool. Look at our modern fleet, we say, implying that anything older is a liability that will lead to project delays. We have to kill that snobbery. We need to reach a point where showing up with a 15-year-old machine isn't a cause for embarrassment, but a source of pride. Imagine a tender process where the client doesn't ask for the average age of your fleet, but for your stewardship record. They want to see how much life you've squeezed out of your equipment and how well you've maintained it. In such a brave new world, a spotless, perfectly tuned older machine becomes a badge of honour. It says your company has the discipline to look after its assets and the skill to maintain complex systems and the integrity to not buy new metal just for the sake of appearances. It's a shift from a culture of use and discard to a culture of care and preserve. Now, that also changes the status of the people in the workshop. For far too long, the mechanics and service techs have been our unsung heroes, often seen as a necessary cost rather than a value add. But if we move to a model of longevity, those people could become the most important players in the company. We'll be looking for master technicians, craftsmen who don't just swap parts on a diagnostic code, but who understand the very soul of the machine. Ultimately, we're talking about a future where we're judged on the care we take of our machines rather than our willingness to constantly buy new ones. It's a future that would unquestionably demand more of us, more discipline, better engineering, and a much thicker skin when the salesman comes knocking with the latest must-have model. But environmentally, at least, that's the only future that actually makes sense. Yes, it is easier to buy a new machine than it is to maintain an old one. Yes, it is easier to buy a new machine than it is to maintain an old one. But we can't keep digging holes in the ground just so we can build machines to dig more holes in the ground. There you are. That's my my manifesto for the future, which oddly is the past. That's my take on things. We've said ConExpo have got an area and a bunch of sessions dedicated to taking care of machines. Bauma, we had remanufactured machines being displayed proudly. This is what we can do. This is how you can get another life out of it. Are we ready for that? Don't think the finance companies will be particularly pleased about it. I'm not entirely sure the manufacturers themselves will be keen on the idea. You know, we've gone from selling 10,000 machines a year to selling 2,000, but taking care of an awful lot more. Does that, weighed against the future of the planet? Is that a big deal? The thing that I couldn't, and I did try, I promise I did try. The thing I couldn't work into that while I was writing it was how such a future might potentially skew the manufacturers that we buy from. There is a temptation, I think, particularly in the UK, where we're very plant hire and rental heavy. There is that desire to buy a lot for as little as possible. Mini excavator wise, I think we can all agree that maybe Kubota and Takuchi are probably the creme de la creme, but we'll buy something out of China or something like that because, frankly, who cares? If you are required or expected to keep your equipment for longer, what does that do to the bottom end of the market? If somebody passed a rule today or tomorrow that said, if you buy an excavator of 20 tons and above, you must keep it for the next 10 years, or it cannot go to scrap, can't be sold overseas for in the next 10 years. Would you necessarily go and buy Chinese? Would you buy Korean? Or would you be considering European, American, Japanese? Personally, I think if, whenever I think about remanufacturing and rebuilding, my thoughts always turn to Caterpillar. They've been doing it for forever. They do it incredibly, incredibly well. And don't get me wrong, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. But when you think about a big dozer or a big excavator, think about a D10, D11. There's a huge amount of steel there. And if you've taken good care of that steel ain't going anywhere. The actual chassis, the frame, the undercarriage, not the tracks, but the undercarriage itself, everything about that is built to last not one life, not two, possibly three, possibly even four. From a pure sustainability point of view, it makes perfect sense to, after 4, 5, 7 years, bring it in, strip it back, maybe put a new heart in it, new engine, strip out all the moving parts, replace them with new. Yes, you might end up spending, 2/3 of the cost of a new machine, but you're saving money and you're saving the planet at the same time. To my mind, it makes perfect sense. It really does. And I realize there are practicalities. For example, a complete remanufacture of a D10, D11 is going to take months. can you as a company, if you're running a quarry and your prime mover is a dozer, can you afford not to have it there for the next 6 months while it's being rebuilt? Obviously, if you're buying a new machine, you take one out, you put a new one in, and you crack on. That's something that needs to be overcome. But again, the likes of Caterpillar and Finning have hire fleets. Take a machine out of their hire fleet while yours is being remanufactured. Not a problem, is it? It can all be accomplished should we so desire. But I do wonder. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I went to see the Jumbo that is now being operated by Despe over in Italy. This is not the first Jumbo. This one is obviously based on a Caterpillar 6015, modified by the fine folks over at Larini and now put to work. But before they did that one, Despe had actually done one about 10, maybe even 11 years ago with Liebherr, still running. Now, and I can say this because it is so demonstrably true. Despe take better care of their machines than any contractor I have ever encountered, by a country mile. I mean, they, after every project, their machines come back in, they're washed, they're repainted, they have new stickers put on them. So when they leave their, when they go to the next job, it looks like a brand new machine. Now, the fact that all their machines are white probably demands that level of care, but that's what they do. But they've got, high reach excavator. It might, I might even be underselling it. It might be 11, 12 years old now. And that thing, it would be very, very valuable as a second-hand machine. I think other companies would be lucky to have it. But that thing is still earning its keep 11, 12 years later. Is that where we're headed? What's going on over in the chat? Let's have a gander. Jim says, hang on a minute, let me go back. We've missed a bit. Jim says, but remanufacturing is the enemy of big business and the government's always back businesses. We do find ourselves caught betwixt and between, don't we? I think a lot of our governments, not just here in the UK, but around the world, with the exception of America, which seems to be going backwards, we do like to talk up our commitment to the environment, but when push comes to shove, we do very little about it. But can we genuinely sustain constantly buying new machines? And I wonder, I'm thinking about this more from an automotive standpoint, but the same rules apply. When my dad bought his first new car, I was probably 11, 12 years old at the time. And my dad bought himself a Ford Escort Estate, mainly for fishing, but he bought himself this new car. And he had to have a thing hanging in the back, or a sticker in the back saying, please pass running in. And I, off the top of my head, I'm sure he had to sort of run it in for about 10,000 miles. I may be exaggerating. It might have been 2,000, but whatever. He had to run it in. And when I then, some years later, when I started work as a full-time journalist, I was given a company car. And our company cars were replaced at 60,000 hours. 60,000 miles. You clocked 60,000 miles, you took the car back, and they gave you a new one. You think about the car, and I'm only going back to 1990, so nearly 40 years ago, but the cars back then, some still required a degree of running in, but 60,000, 70,000, maybe 80,000 miles, and that car was kind of past its sell-by date. You look at a modern car today, 100,000, walk in the park. Doesn't, you look on some of the, the used car websites at, an older Mercedes or a BMW, and 100, 120, 150,000 miles. Yeah, all right, that seems fair. So long as it's been well maintained, they'll take it. They'll take that in their stride. Well, for Mercedes and BMW, you read Caterpillar, Volvo, Liebherr, Komatsu, Hitachi. It's a weird analogy to draw, but you know we have motorway speed limits of 70 miles an hour. Part of the reason they're set at 70 miles an hour is because when they were set, the braking efficiency of our vehicles was such that, you know, we needed to be able to stop before we hit whatever was in front of us. Our cars have got faster, more comfortable, way more efficient, but their braking systems have also evolved in that same period as well. You know, I've driven a Lexus, a Ferrari, a Porsche, you know, top of the range cars. And yes, they've got enormous amounts of power, but so have their brakes. 70 miles an hour on a British motorway for more modern cars. You know, and I realise I'm kind of talking myself around in circles. If we're to protect the planet, I don't want cars doing 150 miles an hour around the M25, and our traffic levels wouldn't allow it. But the braking systems on those cars have moved with the times. Our lease models haven't moved with the times. Our mindset haven't moved with the times. You know, you go back 20 years, I've got a brand new excavator, fantastic. I've got a 5-year-old excavator. Ugh, that's probably likely to break down and cause us project delays, and you know, it's got a few gouges out the counterweight. Yeah, that doesn't look particularly good. Now we've moved on. Well, I say we've moved on. I think the technology has moved on. What hasn't moved on is our, you know, we must have something new. Or look, and even when you think about my side of the business, we do it less in the UK magazines now, but I know some of the Irish magazines still do it, and some of the European magazines still do it. They feature photographs of proud new owner stood in front of a machine, shaking hands or receiving the keys to a new machine from the manufacturer or the local dealer. You know, it's a source of pride. Look, we've got a new machine. Is it not equally a sense of pride that your engineering team have kept an older machine going for that long? And there's this weird kind of hinterland with that. If somebody said to you, I've got a Hymac 580 and I still use it every day, you'd go, oh, wow, look at you, aren't you? Man alive, you must take fantastic care of that machine. You've kept it going for that long. That's amazing. Because it's been going for 30 years. But if you say you've kept a machine going for 10 years, is the company in trouble? Bit hard up, are you? Can't get the finance for a new one? Weird, right? Thanks, Dan. Machine design takes up a massive amount of my thoughts through my work days. I do my day job on autopilot. That makes me a little bit nervous. Andy says, if manufacturers went from a purchase to lease model with a life maintenance and service contract, they'd need a nationwide network of service centres. Would Korea, etc., be able to compete? It's a good point. And we do have, all of the major dealers have a national network, because here in the UK, despite the fact the UK is a relatively small island, we do seem to like a local dealership. I'm thinking, I don't know how many branches Finning have in the UK now. 20? 30? I genuinely don't know. I've not looked for a long time. So, locality of supply wouldn't be a problem. And I think the others have replicated that. I think the Japanese certainly have, the Koreans to a slightly lesser degree have, the Chinese not quite yet, but it's early days for those. But yeah, imagine that. But I also wonder about, should the onus necessarily be on the dealer or the manufacturer? And again, when you think about the technology that we have at our disposal right now, and I going back to the point I made about sealed components and that kind of thing, set that aside for a second. If I were a demolition contractor, a ground worker, whatever it might be, and I own, for example, an excavator, a Caterpillar excavator. Using the Caterpillar app, using the Caterpillar website, I can figure out precisely what a problem is with my machine. You know, I can diagnose it using the app and everything else. I can isolate the particular part that I need to whip out and to replace, and I can also watch a video tutorial to tell me precisely how to find it, how to remove it, how to replace it. We've not had that before. You know, we always relied on old Bob in the workshop with his 40 years of experience. Are we headed back that way? Are we headed back that way where we can take better care of our own machines? And who would be more committed? When you think about it as a set of balance scales. If a machine isn't particularly well cared for now, and ultimately it goes wrong, chances are the manufacturer bags themselves a new deal. I'm not saying they're not committed to keeping machines running, but you know, they do have a fallback position, don't they? If the owner operator were taking care of that machine, bearing in mind their very livelihood depends upon it, who's going to take better care of that machine? The dealer, the manufacturer, or the person that needs it to keep the bills paid? And as I say, with the access to technology, YouTube tutorials, apps on your phone, even within the cab, you know, I've not looked at this for quite some time, but I'm fairly sure you can summon up on the screens within the Caterpillar machines, diagnostics and that kind of thing. Would that not make more sense? Does that become your Saturday afternoon? You fire the machine up, press a few buttons. We've got a bit of a problem with that. And we'll take that out and put that one in, following the instructions on the app. Is that the way we're headed? Because we do need a mindset shift. I mean, I was actually quite proud of that ending that I came up with. But as it stands at the moment, we are digging holes in the ground so we can build more machines to dig more holes in the ground. We're kind of caught in a perpetual loop. That can't be the wise way forward. Part of that, I think I've mentioned this before. I'm fairly sure he wrote it for The Guardian. Rowan Atkinson, who's a bit of a car enthusiast, went off and bought himself an electric car, very excited about electric car technology and wanted to be an early adopter. And he very much bought into the whole notion of it being lean and clean and green and good for the environment and everything else. And then he did the actual maths. I mean, probably should have done it the other way around, but then he did the actual maths. And it turns out he would have been, you know, in terms of environmental, he would have been far better off sticking with the car that he already had and not bothering with the electric. And electric is a good example. I mentioned it as, what did I call it? You know, we're basically trading exhaust emissions for power station emissions. Yes, I've got a Tesla. I'm really good to the environment, but I am going to go home and plug it into the mains, which is fed by a coal-fired power station. It defeats the object. You've not moved the needle at all. And I think we've got exactly the same argument in this business, in the demolition and construction business. And the bizarre thing is, nobody's talking about it. And I'm not saying I'm any kind of pioneer here, but whenever you think about and talk about and read about the future and sustainability and environmental stewardship, it all revolves around it goes back to Jim's point about keeping big business moving. It all revolves around going back or going and buying something new. You've got a hybrid car. You probably want an electric because that'll be a bit cleaner. Oh, okay, I've got an electric car. You probably want a hydrogen because that's cleaner still. And we fall for it with cars, and I think we fall for it probably even more so here in this business. Who is making the argument for equipment retention? And I understand it. You know, JCB, Komatsu, Caterpillar, Volvo, Liebherr, Hitachi, all of these companies are built on the basis of shifting new metal. We've sold 10,000 machines this year, must do 11,000 next year, must do 12,000 a year after that. Constantly selling new machines while they're talking about their commitment to the environment. You know, we've got Volvo using fossil-free steel, and yet that fossil-free steel is still new steel. Somebody is going to have to buy a new piece of equipment to make use of that fossil-free steel. Whereas in actual fact, I mean, they applied it to an ADT. If you could, rather than chopping your existing ADT in after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you kept it for 10. You can keep your fossil-free steel. I've done my bit for the environment. But I think the biggest challenge is not the finance, it's not the engineering. I think the engineering already exists, to be perfectly honest. I think Caterpillar and Liebherr and Komatsu, the people that are really at the very forefront of remanufacturing, I think they've already proved that it is a model that can and does work. As I said in that spiel, I think the biggest challenge we have exists in our own heads. Do I want to be turning up to work in a machine that's 5 years old, or would I rather turn up in one that's got 4 hours on the clock? I think that's, and listen, I know you guys are in the time we've been doing this. I know Gary has had it. I know Steve Williamson has had it. You know, the excitement over getting, taking delivery of a brand new machine. I understand that. I'm the first to admit, I'll go to ConExpo, I'll get in the cab of the machine, and in addition to looking around and pointing the camera at it, I'll be sat there going, oh, new cab smell. Love that. Absolutely love that. But is that our future reality? Mick Norton has just arrived. Unfortunately, Mick, you've arrived. You've walked in the door just as I'm about to walk out of it. But good morning to you, my friend. Thank you very much indeed for being here. I'm going to love you and leave you because I've got stuffed. I'm training in AI at the moment. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but ultimately, I'm hoping it will make my life just a smidgen easier. And it says, roll on nuclear fusion power stations. Yeah. I think one of my concerns with all things environmental is there is always a reason to put it off till tomorrow. I don't want an electric excavator because in 5 years' time I'll be able to get a hydrogen one. But what about now? What about the emissions that you're creating right now? Now, as I say, I'm fully aware of the challenges of electric machines and that they're not all as green as some might have you believe. But there's always a reason to. Well, I won't do it now because the technology isn't proven. I'll do it. I'll do it in 5 years. I'll do it in 10 years, and we're waiting for the generation 2 when it's even cleaner still. Exactly the same with nuclear fusion. What's to stop you having solar panels or a big windmill in your garden between now and then? Yes, nuclear fusion might come along and be the savior of mankind, but what are you doing about the saving of mankind between now and 20 years' time when we actually have access to that? You can't keep putting it off because we're killing the planet, people. You'd have thought that would be enough to focus the mind, but apparently it isn't. We need to appeal to people's back pockets as well, which is weird. Anyway, people, that will do us for today. Please go and have a good day. Look after yourself. Look after your equipment. Taken out of context, that would sound terrible. Look after your machines. Look after your machines. I mean, look after your equipment as well. We don't want anything going wrong down there, but look after your machines. And your machines will largely look after you. I'll be back tomorrow for yet more of the same. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Till then, everybody, have a fine and splendid day.